Many people don't realize they're in survival because it never felt like danger. It felt like life. It felt like love. It felt like how relationships worked. And even when something inside them clenched, even when there was dread or exhaustion or a quiet sense of feeling unsafe, they didn't know what those feelings were. So they learned to assume they're the problem. Survival doesn't always feel like fear. It doesn't always feel loud or threatening. Most of the time, it just feels like life. It feels like being responsible, like staying afloat, reading the room, or managing tone. It feels like knowing what to say and what never to say. It feels like being good at relationships, while also being inexplicably tired by them. It feels like effort that never quite turns off. And because that effort was always there, because it was what you were taught love required, it never registered as danger or harm. When survival is the baseline, you don't experience it as survival. You experience it as who you are and what life is. For me, survival didn't look like upheaval. It looked like competence, adaptability, emotional intelligence. I didn't think I was unsafe. I thought I was perceptive, caring, strong. And anytime something felt off, anytime I felt depleted, unseen, or hollow, I didn't think to myself, something is wrong here. Or even, maybe this person or this experience isn't for me. No. Instead, I thought, I must be asking too much. I must be misreading. I must be the problem. And even though telling myself those things never felt like the truth, they did feel inevitable, given what I'd lived. Because if I was the problem, then the world could stay intact. Now I move into self-blame. Self-blame is not an act of defeat. It's a human act of default response, a survival strategy. Because if you don't have language for a body notification, you assign meaning wherever you can. And when responsibility never comes from the other side, self-blame can feel like the only way to create an ending. A place where the looping finally stops. And when the people, systems, or relationships around you are the only form of connection you know, it's safer to turn on yourself than to question the structure you depend on. So instead of asking, why does this feel bad? Instead, you learn to ask, what is wrong with me? Because that question keeps belonging possible. Survival doesn't stay contained to one relationship either. It becomes a way of relating everywhere. You stop relating from desire and start relating from management. You learn how to stay small, how to stay useful, how to stay included, how to prevent rupture before it happens. For me, it wasn't conscious defense. It was felt, but never fully understood. My body was responding to something that my mind didn't have language for yet. So instead of choosing from clarity, I learned to organize around prevention. You don't ask what you want. You ask what will keep things from falling apart. You don't notice your limits. You notice shifts. You don't listen for truth. You listen for threat. And still, this doesn't register as danger. It registers as love, as maturity, as being good with people, as inevitability. And that is not because those things feel right. It's because believing it could be different, while nothing changed, taught you that belief itself was the harm. Survival doesn't end with insight alone. It ends when the body stops complying with what it was never meant to endure. The spell breaks quietly because the realization wasn't the answer. It was the moment you saw how long your body had been carrying the truth alone, without validation from yourself or from anyone else. So effort drops. The vigilance loosens. The tension that organized your life releases. And suddenly, you don't know who you are anymore. You didn't lose yourself, but the pressure that used to define you is now gone. When survival ends, people expect relief. But usually, what comes first is disorientation, confusion, isolation, looping thoughts, memories replaying with a new intensity. Moments that once felt loving, now seen as tarnished, or suddenly threaded with shame. Grief without a story. You might miss people or relationships that you know hurt you. You might feel lost when urgency is gone, and nothing is telling you who to be. You might feel empty, even though nothing is technically wrong. And this is where people go into what I call spiral mode. They hear that inner bully voice in their head. You made the wrong choice. You're regressing. And you say you're healed. See, you're nobody without them. But what's actually happening is that the old organizing force is gone, and the new one hasn't arrived yet. That phase is just your system trying to protect you. It's a threshold period. And there's a grief here that rarely gets light shed upon it. You're not just grieving people. You are grieving the only version of love you were ever taught to recognize. The only way of relating that felt familiar. The only map you had. Even if it hurt. Even if it cost you. Letting go of survival means letting go of a whole world that once made sense. And that loss is very real. And it deserves respect. It deserves time and space. It doesn't deserve self-shaming. Here's the truth of this phase. After survival, you don't rebuild your life by deciding faster. You rebuild it by listening longer. This phase doesn't ask for answers. It asks for orientation. It asks you to stay present without rushing to replace what's gone. New relationships, new identities, new explanations. That rush is understandable, but not all movement is growth. Sometimes the most honest thing you can do is stay still long enough to recognize what safety feels like before you try to decide who you are now. There was a long period for me where nothing pulled me forward. No big desire, no clear direction, no spark I could find in much of anything. And the old voice kept saying, "You're wasting your time. What is the point of it all?" But something else was happening at the same time. For the first time, my body wasn't organizing itself around pressure. And without pressure, it needed time. Time to learn a new language. I didn't need a plan or to figure it all out. I needed permission to not be the problem anymore. If you're in a similar place, quiet, unsure, detached, I'd like you to hear this with love. Not knowing what comes next doesn't mean you're lost. It means the old directions no longer apply. And the fact that you can feel that is not a failure of resilience. It's evidence that survival has loosened its grip. Your body is telling the truth before your mind knows how to interpret it. That's not something to override. It's something to respect, something to make room for, and eventually, something you'll learn to listen to, you'll understand, and then follow. You didn't waste your life. You learned how to live inside what was available to you before there was another way. And now, you're beginning to see what was actually there all along. And the moment you stop assuming you're the problem is the moment your body begins to speak in a different register. Even if you don't understand it yet, even if it's quiet, that quiet is not absence. It's the space where survival has ended. And your core identity is learning how to be embodied. Survival was not a life sentence. It was what you relied on before you could trust who you actually are.